So for this next interview, I want to bring on Fredrik from Dune. I'm sure if you've been in this space over the last 5 years, you've definitely heard of Dune Analytics or have used any of their pages to see what the hell is happening on chain. But there's a lot of that history that we want to cover today, and I'll talk about where the rest of the data analytics world is headed. So to talk about that, please join me in welcoming Fredrik on stage. I'm super excited for this one. Hi.
Me too.
There's a lot of things happening on chain now. And if anything, this is like the definition of exponential growth. We've seen from having one testnet 6 years ago and just mainnet to just so many different networks to a whole amount of craziness that's about to happen. What I want to do is start off by just kind of asking you sort of what was it like 6 years ago, and what was that frustration that sort of made you start a whole company around querying on-chain information?
It was hard, I would say. 6 years ago, it's hard still, but no. I would say, the whole industry was in a very different spot, and I would say it was more of a clear sort of underdog feeling amongst everyone, and so just getting anything off the ground back then felt really hard. But so Mats and me, my co-founder, who's also here, we had a chance back in around 2018 to work on some crypto stuff. We did some Ethereum sort of prototypes and playing around in the previous company, big company we worked for. And then when the hype died around the summer 2018, sort of off of the ICO bubble, we realized we still believe in this space. We think permissionless innovation in finance and self-custodying of assets and all these things are important ideas that we want to see in the world, and we want to help succeed. And so we were thinking that there's going to be a lot of people building on-chain and building experiences. And basically what you know already from existing sort of web products is that you need to know a lot about the data to build good products. That's basically how it's done. You can't have
you need to know what's going on before you can make decisions.
Who's sort of clicking where, and what's working, what's not working. So that was kind of the initial sort of seed of the idea. And then within the first 6 months, we basically realized how different it is that this data is open in and of itself. So, a blockchain is the first time a database is public by default and updates.
It's still weird. Everything is up there for anybody to just look at, and everybody has the same information.
Yeah, it's totally unheard of. If you think about any data tooling, any sort of data experience, it's all siloed. It's all usually tied into a company that has a database, and they will protect that and they will work on that data in their own environment. And so we kind of had this epiphany a little bit into Dune. We had built some stuff. We had worked on cleaning up the data and making it easy to query, but sort of realized, and really my co-founder Mats that realized that this stuff is open. So it's better to sort of lean into that and embrace that and further accelerate that than to sort of try to work against it or build a data product that looks more like traditional finance or sort of product analytics tools.
Awesome. So that was 6 years ago, and you kind of hinted that, but obviously other than having Dune exist now, has querying on-chain data become easier natively, or do we still kind of suffer some of the same pain points from years ago?
I think yes and no. It is definitely harder in the sense that when we started out, it was Ethereum, L1. We just focused on the smart contracts that's there and making that easy, and that was it. And so in that sense, it was sort of easier to get going and have a clear focus. Now, obviously, it's way more heterogeneous and more things popping up, and you need to keep track on all these things. So that's of course very hard. But I do think that also, the market is trying to solve this, right? So we're trying to solve this. There's a bunch of people that try to make this easier. So for sort of the broader sort of audience and data consumers, I think it's both, of course, for us providers, it's always a catch-up game and being on top of all the things that's moving. But I see the tooling going in the right direction. So hopefully, I think we're moving to a state where it is going to be a nice experience to build with and work with all this data. But it's we're not quite there yet in a sense. Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's good news because that means there's an opportunity for you to fix a bunch of stuff, but also that we actually have made some progress, so that's not actually all too bad. One thing that you see a lot in this space is the power of a group of people who are excited about an idea or a product really sort of make this a really interesting experience for everybody else to just actually benefit off of. And Dune Wizards are definitely known for that. And you've had a really early set of people who kind of were just writing all these SQL queries to get the most amount of interesting information on chain to be visible and create these public dashboards. How would you kind of think about and comment on the Dune community in the early days and the role that they've played in helping you be where you are now?
It definitely, you know, it's been huge for us and I think for the whole space. And you know, when we tried to raise money in the beginning, there was a lot of investors that were just like, "Oh, you need to like paywall this stuff and sell it to like institutions, right? That's how you make money in like sort of financial data." But we were like, no, actually, there's like 50 people in a Telegram group that we're trying to serve, right? And we did everything we could to like empower them and help them figure out the queries and whatnot. And for a long time, it was a pretty small group, you know, less than 100 people for quite a while, but it was super active, right? So Mats and I would be in there, and like all these users would help each other out. And these were people that were just like super curious about what was happening on chain, right? And it took a while. But this is, I think it's an example of this, like, you know, if you find the niche and really, really try to serve it, and then we had this fundamental belief in the openness of like, it's better if people work together and come together and build on top of each other with understanding this data as opposed to, you know, going off in silos and working.
But if you had just had an API only and everybody was just writing their own scripts, it would have not been the
Yeah, then it sort of ends up all over. And so I would say it took quite a while, but then suddenly the little bit of inflection point for us was basically like DeFi summer in summer 2020. And then we'd been at it for over 2 years already, but that was like when the product really made sense, and so a lot of people wanted to, you know, do all this crazy stuff and
see how they were doing.
Yeah. And then we had all the dashboards, and they popped up. You know, there's a new project. There's yams, and then like 1 hour later, you have a dashboard, and
every single vegetable and fruit emoji
exactly.
you can think of just became the goal and homepage for Dune.
Humble farmers. Yeah.
Well, I don't want to go too deep into this thing, but I'm curious about this. How has it been like scaling on the engineering side of this? You've obviously had to index everything that's happening on chain, but what have been some of the challenges on the engineering pieces?
Yeah, it's definitely not trivial in any sense. There's a lot of data coming in, and there's a lot of queries running on top of them. It's a very flexible system that we built, and you know, typically the users of sort of sophisticated data tooling writing SQL is typically like a data engineer or data analyst inside of a company, right? But we've just said, oh, like, you know, let's let anyone go on our website and just do arbitrary things with this data, which is you know, very computational heavy and very so there's like all the blockchain data coming in, but then you also need to like have a system that's performant and a nice user experience, but it's not getting abused by, you know, random people also. So that's challenging. On the sort of ingestion side, there was, for a very long time, very painful with all these new Ethereum sort of forks, basically sort of taking get and then just like increasing the gas limit a ton and doing nothing else. Sort of, I'm not going to throw anyone under the bus, but like there's some systems that, you know, basically took get and just tweak some parameters, and it's like, okay, here's a new blockchain. And that was super, super painful for someone like us, because deriving the data out of that system, it was not built for that amount of data. So when we don't get all the traces and logs and all the sort of, you know, juicy stuff from the node, it took a long time for the node to compute. And when you then also have like very fast block times, it's like a tremendous challenge to keep up. So there's a lot of those things, and we also support Solana now, which, you know, produce a ton of data, and of course all the L2s incoming.
We'll get into that for sure. Well, we talked about the engineering challenges, but what has it been like scaling on all the non-engineering side of things? I mean, I remember you being 2 people for a couple of years, and where are you now?
Yeah, no, that's also a challenge for sure. We're about 45 people now. I think, it's hard for any startup to scale and grow the organization and all these things, but I think it's particularly hard in this space since the sort of swings are so violent. You go from very deep lows and very high highs very quickly, and so figuring like the right level of investment, like how many folks should we have integrating new chains and all these things, and is it worth storing and promising basically to people that we're gonna maintain this thing when it's like the hottest thing in the world today, but who knows, next month maybe it's like not relevant at all, and then so it's a constant sort of ROI and tinkering.
They say the startups are a roller coaster. This is like the perfect one in this
Literally
space.
one of our company values is embrace the roller coaster. So.
Speaking of being able to support new different types of cases of chains, obviously you kind of just mentioned you have Solana, which has a much faster block time. We're seeing different L2s with like sub-second latency and kind of pre-confirmations. But that's just what we have now. We're seeing on a daily basis some new L2 or new OP stack chain pop up, or kind of somebody else kind of creating their specific app chain. And it's not crazy to imagine that a year from now we'll have a few thousands. We already have a few hundreds. How does that world look like? And I want to ask this questions from like a couple of angles. One, just on your ability to actually ingest all that information and make it useful for people. But also, kind of, do you think that creates just too much fragmentation? Are we just kind of seeing chaos? Does that mean we're just going to live in our own universes but never really talk about what's happening everywhere else? What does that world mean to you from a data standpoint?
Yeah, so for us, we're really shifting now from a world where we mostly would go and like integrate the chain and fetch the data from the node, and then we would focus on like letting people build dashboards and engage with this data on our site, to thinking of Dune more as an open-ended platform where anyone can put data on Dune and anyone can take data out. So we're trying to be more flexible on, because we know that we can't and really no one can't, and this is basically the same idea we had on dashboards and sort of the analytics side initially, right? Where it's like, oh, there's going to be so much stuff happening here that it's impossible for one single company to just keep up. So it's better to just like provide the sort of underlying infrastructure and convenience of just like anyone going apeshit and figuring out all the things they want to know about what's happening on chain, right? And so that's kind of now coming to the data import side and sort of the chain coverage side, where we're building way more tooling for people to just put data on Dune, and it could be L2 data and whatnot, but also just adjacent. We have MEV data and NFT data and a bunch of things that doesn't necessarily live strictly on chain, but
that's a good point.
Yeah, it's like adjacent. So we really try to now just make it way more convenient for people to put data on Dune and open the floodgates, so to speak. And then on the other side, let people take data out. So we now have APIs where you can turn any query result on Dune into an API endpoint, so you can feed it into like any system you want, and also like data shares with other platforms, and so you can get like the tables accessible in your own data platform. So we really try to just like, we have this saying, the data must flow, and that's quite literally what it is. Just like let the thing.
Awesome.
Yeah.
A big piece of, I assume, what you want to do is make it easier for people to also understand what to do with the data, and you've already kind of done that with some of the LLM stuff that you've launched, where you can just actually ask a question in natural language and query things on chain. What's the reaction been so far for that from the users, and what are some other kind of interesting product? You kind of hinted at a couple things, but what are some interesting product improvements you're doing to help make that data querying easy?
Yeah, no, for sure. This is super exciting what AI can do to sort of data understanding and querying and whatnot. I think it's what we've seen. So I would say we're excited about some of the things we've built, but I don't think we feel like we really nailed it yet, or like there's still much more to be done. I think what you realize is, a good analyst doesn't only write the SQL query they also understand, sort of they curate in a sense. You know, they decide what are interesting metrics, how should they be presented and whatnot. And so if you have just like sort of anyone just write the prompt and like, you know, sure, we can create the SQL for you in the background, but you need to ask the right questions and figure out, you know, what are the cool or interesting things to engage sort of with. And there I'm quite excited about the fact that Dune can sort of do both of these things. So, you know, we can bring in what other people are doing and showcase that and let people sort of discover what is interesting together, while also abstracting away more of the lower level stuff. But I think it's, yeah, it's still a lot of work to be done. So yeah, and then sort of to the second part of your question, I think it's still, data is really underutilized in this space still. Like, it is, again, back to what we started with, it's just insane that you can look at, you know, all this stuff happening real time, whether that's for, you know, understanding risk or like doing
your own growth to see how your app's doing.
Yeah. And this is public. Like in Web 2, you will have sophisticated investors spending, you know, tens of millions of dollars a year to scrape GitHub, scrape all kinds of things to figure out who's using what technologies, what's getting traction, and then of course use that to sort of trade and make money. But when you have something like Dune, you can literally, like anyone, just go to dune.com and you know, see what's happening on chain. It's out there for the public, and I think it's exciting for builders that want to track their own things. But it has this, it's supercharged basically the feedback loop that you have in a startup, where in a traditional startup, it's like, okay, you build, you learn something, you get some data, and then you iterate. And in crypto, you have, obviously the smart contracts and whatnot are open source, which is great. But you can also see the traction that smart contract got. So you don't only see what they built, you see
how they got there, because you have the full graph of every interaction they've had.
Exactly. So you have this tremendous resource to build and iterate way faster because it's a shared, you know, data layer on top of just the open source code. So I think that's still underappreciated, and the fact that you can just learn and build in the wild and see what other people are doing and learn from their traction as well. And I hopefully that will bring the space forward, you know, faster and faster than anything else. And I think that's what got us excited in the first place. Is this is a compounding, open nature of everything, which is so powerful. And I think we still have a lot we can do to harness that.
Awesome. Well, I think in this case, this is a perfect note to end this on. I can't wait to see the next set of features and enhancements that you add to the Dune platform. And thank you so much for this chat.
My pleasure. Thank you.